In here. I want to thank obviously our guests on the panel. We're going to talk about the lay of the land of state politics here in the great state of North Dakota. We've got the chairman of North Dakota Republican Party, Bob Harms, the executive director, Jason Flores, the chairman of the Democrat Party, Bob Ballou, and the executive director of the Democrat Party here in the state, Chad Oben. So let's start. And again, if you want to text your questions, comments, which again was great to see in the higher ed conversation, GNDC 22333. We're going to get to as many of those as we possibly can. Mr. Ballou, I want to start with you. Let's talk about the current just sort of lay of the land of state politics, if you will, and where you see the state of North Dakota headed.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. It's great to be with all of you today. Please continue eating. We're used to this. Okay. Well, North Dakota politics. First of all, the Republican Party has a supermajority control of the legislature, and they've been in charge of state affairs for 20 years. And in 2012, I believe the voters said, you know, we really do believe in a two-party system when they elected Heidi Heitkamp to the United States Senate. And so the Democratic Party in 2014 is moving on that. We intend to put forward we have very aggressive candidates that are interested in putting forth new ideas. Now, our economy in North Dakota is, yes, outstanding. But what needs to be addressed from a public policy perspective is making sure that our communities and our citizens of the state are on an equal playing field with addressing many of the social and infrastructure problems that are faced with this newfound prosperity that we have. And so we as a Democratic Party believe that it's time for some balance. North Dakotans are better served, we believe, when competitive ideas from both parties can be put on the table, openly discussed, and bring about a better opportunity for new vision for North Dakota when it comes to addressing the issues facing this new economic development prosperity we have, and it's not just in western North Dakota, but eastern North Dakota too. And so we have put forth candidates. They're energetic, they have new ideas, and they're experienced, and we think that in 2014, the voters are going to say, yes, it is time for some balance in the political process.
Chairman Harms, question here. Do you think the state's headed in the right direction? I'm assuming you're going to say yes. So more specifically, where do you see us? And I know Governor Dalrymple has got his 2020 vision. Where do you see us in 2020 or 10 years from now?
Thanks, Chris. And you're right. I do think that North Dakota is headed in the right direction. And I also want to thank the Chamber for putting this event on. I've been a strong believer in the development of policy and the discussion of ideas, debate, open dialogue with the members of our public, and I think we get a better result in that process. Having said that, yeah, I think that North Dakota is on the right track. We're headed in the right direction. I mean, there are so many statistics out there. We're the fastest growing economy, the highest per capita growth in income for the last 6 out of the last 7 years, lowest unemployment rate in the country. All of those are indicators of the policies that North Dakotans have put in place over the last 20 years. And my friend Bob Ballou is correct. Republicans have been in control for the last 20 years. And we sit on some wonderful natural resources, but so do other states. And those states aren't having the kind of economic revival and energy that North Dakota is enjoying, and it's largely a result of the policies that we put in place long term. We began this recovery with the election of Ed Schaefer in 1992. I was working as a lawyer in Williston at that time. I went to work in 1980, ran that business through those 12 years, and those were tough times. And we began to change the policies in North Dakota to promote business, to promote economic development, to develop our natural resources. And that policy, long-term, business-friendly, has really produced the results that we're looking at and we're enjoying today. So short answer, absolutely right direction, and we're going to continue to do more of what we've seen in the last 20 years.
Can you give some specifics, though, when you look at 2020 or 10 years from now? Where do you see the state of North Dakota?
Well, I see us doing more of the same, and I think the conversation that we just finished on higher ed is a good one that we can take to heart. We're going to have more wealth in our state than we ever imagined possible. You'll hear in the next panel the amount of money that we have banked. I think that's good policy. I was involved in the creation of the Legacy Fund, but I think the point being the higher ed system is just a good example of where we should be with the newfound wealth that North Dakota now enjoys. We ought to think about how do we attract the kinds of high-skilled students to our state? How do we keep them? What kind of policies do we have to have in place for higher ed and K-12 that we can have top shelf, not just best in the country, but best in the world in terms of educating our kids in high school, in college? How do we take those kinds of thought processes and then create the kind of society that we can only dream of? But I think that's the kind of thinking that we ought to be embracing in North Dakota in the next, for the next 10 years.
Chairman Ballew, here's two questions for you, sir. One is, it was just a moment ago, they talked about Chairman Ballew refers to Republicans as extremists. What do you mean specifically?
Sure. A couple of things. First of all, I would invite everybody in the room to read the two political parties' platforms. And in reading those platforms, I think you'll get an idea of which party is more extreme on some of the issues than the other. But let's take an example. The Republican Party, through the legislature and its super control, passed the third most restrictive voter ID law in the nation. Very restrictive, very restrictive. The legislature, through the Republican leadership, put a measure on the ballot this fall that I think is very extreme. And that measure, I believe, is measure number 4, which says, oh, by the way, for 125 years, the people have been trusted to vote and initiate measures. But from now on, you can't initiate a measure that may have a fiscal impact on the state of North Dakota unless we, the legislature, agree to it. I think that's extreme. And then you take the social legislation that was addressed and passed in the North Dakota legislature in this past session, and I would say there's some extreme items on that. So extreme that they're already being tested in the courts. The legislature and the Attorney General knows very well that they're not going to win those challenges, but they're willing to spend North Dakota taxpayers' money on those measures while the Attorney General spends his time chasing those lawsuits. We find ourselves having human trafficking problems in North Dakota. We have extreme problems with drugs. We have cartels in the state. So bad, so extreme, that our Republican United States Senator Hoeven and Congressman Kramer go to the federal government and literally beg them to send federal agents into North Dakota to do the Attorney General's job of law enforcement. And then they do that at the same time that they voted for sequestration, 10% cut of every federal agency, and then turn around and vote not to pay the bills that Congress approved of by not raising the debt limit. But yet, they turn to the federal government to do their job. I think there is a number of extreme actions, and what the state needs is some political balance in that thought process. And that's what we intend to do in November, is to bring some balance to that process.
So how does calling Republicans extremists enhance or perpetuate any balance?
Can I touch on that? Well, I think even if you talk to some moderate Republicans, they would agree this last session was full of extreme activities, from the social issues to lasting 80 days to failing to deal with what's going on in western North Dakota. So I don't think it's just Democrats saying that the Republican Party, and again, look at their platform, has become very extreme. It's moderate Republicans who are looking for more balance. That middle that used to get things done in the North Dakota legislature is no longer there.
Chairman Harms, question that came out as well, and I want to have both you and Mr. Ballou discuss this, but obviously January 6th, I believe it is, the 2015 session starts. Top 2 priorities in this next session for the Republican Party.
I would say I'll give you 3 priorities. Tax relief be number 1.
Specifically what?
Property tax relief and reform coupled with other tax relief, number 1. Number 2, funding our priorities, including infrastructure. And number 3, continue the kinds of policies that generate the economy that we enjoy.
Chairman Ballou?
Well, I think, first of all, I think tax relief is extremely important, but I don't think you can get tax relief in the state until we really do look at tax reform. Now, the governor has a committee looking at the property tax issue, and they nibble around the sides. You cannot get to property tax relief until you are ready to talk about and deal with the total taxing system of North Dakota. And when you do that, then I think there's a real opportunity to bring relief to students, to family working people, and to others.
Hey, Chris, can I take that one?
Mr. Flores, that's all yours.
Well, actually, can I
Councilman
take
Feldman.
it? It shows how much more difficult it is to be a North Dakota Democrat than it is to be a North Dakota Republican looking at our hairlines. And seriously, Bob, cut your hair, you're showing
That's right, I'm pretty relaxed.
You guys just had to pull your hair out for 20 years trying to figure out what you're doing wrong, and you haven't really figured it out yet. Let me be clear about something here. I hate going forth in this kind of situation because I've been trying to write down notes and I'm not even going to pull it out and look at it. I can't possibly begin to respond to everything that Chairman Ballou listed out. But let me just take a stab at it overall here. You're talking a lot about balance. You're hearing a lot about balance. You're hearing a lot about Republicans extreme this and extreme that and extreme. And I was trying to count, but I ran out of fingers. My teacher in English class told me not to use the same word in a paragraph that many times. The point is, we've had a two-party system in North Dakota, and the voters for 20 years have been presented with a clear choice. It's not like they haven't articulated their plans before. It's not like they haven't been at a disadvantage or they've been shut up somehow or that they haven't been on the ballot. The voters have had a choice. They've weighed the two sides, left, middle, and right, and they've come out with Republicans are doing the good job for our state, leading us forward, making decisions to take advantage of the resources that we're blessed with, doing what we need to do from a tax policy and from a public policy perspective to bring new people in, to educate our students. Republicans are doing that job, and I'm going to return to that office. And I have every confidence they're going to do that again this year. It isn't once you get a supermajority that all of a sudden everything from the other side is quelled or they don't exist anymore and we just control it so it's like a revolution or a rebellion.
But Jason, can I interrupt you, sir? Because I think a lot of people would say, but let's be honest here, because you've got Republicans that are almost running like Democrats, i.e. Scott Lauser proposes just a 2-year moratorium on income taxes in the state. He doesn't get a vote in the committee. Then you've got Mr. Astrup, who's running for tax commissioner and wants to actually cut taxes for certain people. So, I mean, it makes it challenging, I think, for a Democrat, if you will, because a lot of people, I think, would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you got a lot of Republicans that essentially are running as Democrats.
Well, I'd make the other argument on a national level that every Democrat in any state nationally is running as a Republican, and basically they're taking a playbook out of North Dakota, trying to put that into their platform, and saying, look, if we just do this in this state, or if we just did this nationwide, then all of our problems would be solved. Never mind that I'm a Democrat and I supported everything that Obama's done for the last 6 years, right? So you have many more, there's many more people in this country running as Republicans and running to that conservative middle than are trying to act like Democrats. I mean, when you have a big party and a big tent party like we have as Republicans here in North Dakota, you're going to have a difference of opinion. I don't even agree with my wife 50% of the time, let alone enough to actually have a majority. If I was trying to have a coalition government with her, we'd be screwed, right? But that doesn't mean that there aren't ideas on both ends of the spectrum that we can't work on and agree with. And again, I return to every 2 years, our government in North Dakota has a performance review. For 20 years, we have rehired Republicans, and we have said continue to move our state forward.
And Mr. Ballou, just so I'm clear, I heard you say yes to property tax relief, yes? Or to some sort of tax relief? All right, so we got some agreement there. Mr. Harms, Mr.
Done.
Ballou, that's good.
You know, one of the things that I think that was interesting that Bob said earlier is his 3 priorities. Those were the same 3 priorities they would have said 6 years ago, and they failed to address real property tax reform, infrastructure in Western North Dakota. So I think it's time to maybe get some new ideas in Bismarck because they've had their opportunity.
You just read my mind, so what would you do differently?
Well, first of all, I would look back at the last session, look at some of the bills that the Democrats sponsored. Keeping that money in Western North Dakota. It's unfair that people have to come from Western North Dakota to the legislature to beg for that. So that's the first thing that comes to
Can you
mind.
be more specific? Like, I mean,
Well, the Democrats sponsored a bill that 80% of oil extraction tax would stay in Western North Dakota, so they could work on infrastructure and all the different things that we've been hearing about over and over. Democrats wanted a special session to deal with these issues. The Republicans, again, kicked it down the line.
So, Mr. Flores, he hits the point I just made. When I grew up, conservatives are the government closest to the people is the best form of government. And he just said we had a Democrat proposed bill that wanted to give more money back to the local municipalities, the counties, and things of that nature. Where the state, the Republicans have not done that. Why not?
Well, I think part of the problem there is what you're doing by making that kind of an arrangement and taking to it extreme. I think it's a similar problem to what we all heard with the constitutional amendment earlier today.
Sir,
is that
86% of the oil money is being produced out of 4 counties. So why is it extreme to say, hey, let's have 80% go back to those local areas?
then if the legislature wants to send 80% back in a given year, then they can certainly make that choice. What I'm saying is I'm not an advocate of putting something in a constitution or into law that this set amount or this particular exact formula. I mean, we could take the entire budget and just formula it all out, find a smart guy in Silicon Valley, pull up an algorithm, have it distributed equally and equitably wrong. But that's not the kind of government that we have.
Well,
We
and
have
Chris, let me add or 2 other things on that very point where the money comes from. I'm born and raised in Tioga. Williams County is still a place I do business in. I came from there yesterday. And what's happening in North Dakota right now? Okay, so Williams, Montreal, Dunn, and McKinsey are the ones where the money's coming from. But we didn't take all of the money out. The North Dakota legislature, the governor put somewhere around $700 million back into those counties. Maybe it was 600, but $700 million back to those counties where it came from. And there is a discussion in place right now where there's a disagreement about whether it's 40% that goes back to the locals or 80. I think there's a proposal underway that they'll probably settle at about 60%. So, back to Bob Valou's point, balance. It's the ideas and the debates and the discussions that bring North Dakota forward. And that discussion is underway, and I would guess that come January, we'll see a change in that formula where we will leave more of that oil money back in those 4 counties where it came from. So we're making progress, we're reacting, doing things that we need to do to get things taken care of in the West. That would be one example.
And what percentage or metric would you be a proponent of? Is it 50-50, 60-40?
I don't have an answer for that. I really don't.
Chairman Baloo?
60%, I think, is the number the legislators in the Western communities are looking at.
Chairman Baloo, you mentioned some form of tax relief. The second most important thing in the 2015 session, according to you, is what?
Very definitely dealing with the infrastructure needs of not only Western North Dakota, but Eastern North Dakota. The next most important thing to me is that we, for 125 years, have been in an economy that has ups and downs, agriculture. And our energy economy is going to be exactly the same way. We have an opportunity as a state now with the resources that are coming to us to diversify our economy so that we are not continually dependent upon the vagaries of an up and down economy, whether it be energy or agriculture. This is a golden opportunity for the state of North Dakota. But what we find, I believe, is a legislature controlled by the Republicans that is only interested in reacting to problems. It's just like what Bob just said. In January, we're going to try and do something. They've had 9 years to address the energy impact issues in Western North Dakota, and we're behind the 8 ball in every single item, whether it be solid waste disposal, whether it be radioactive waste disposal, whether it be water disposal with regards to the fracking process of our newfound prosperity. Infrastructure.
Except, Chris,
just 1 minute, you get your chance. I live in Montreal County during the summertime. And we asked the county commissioners, is there any chance that you could help us with grading our road that currently has 9 oil wells on it? They said, we're running out of money. What the Republicans have done is said, look, we're going to wait and see. The Democrats believe that there is an opportunity to be proactive in solving some of these issues going forward. Remember, folks, we've only drilled 10,600 wells. There's another 30 to 40,000 coming. And industry is going to drill those wells. They have the technology, they have the ability, and good for them. It should be that way. But we've also got to make sure, as public policymakers, that our communities have a level playing field. And waiting every 2 years to come foot in hand to the legislature to try and deal with a problem that's a year old or 2 year old or 3 years old is just not getting it done. And we need some balance in the thought process.
Mr. Ford.
You know, I hope that we're blessed for the next 100 years with having such good development in this state that we have this kind of a problem and this kind of policy discussion. There's other parts of the country that aren't having these kind of discussions. They're trying to figure out how to do things. We have so much going on, so many things going for us, both now and into the future, that we are trying to a point, respond to some of those. At the same time, it's been 20 years of policies that have put us in this position. Now we're going to spend, it's going to take time. I'm sorry, there is always going to be more than is done. I think Senator Hovan ends just about every conversation he's ever had with that. Here's what we're doing, here's what we've done, and there's going to be more that's done. When we talk about infrastructure out west, we just sent $2.5 billion to the west for infrastructure needs. That runs the gamut. DOT can't do more highway construction projects out there. It just can't be done. There's not enough capacity to build more roads. Money's been sent to the cities, counties to address those problems that they have, and it's ongoing. And it's formula-based, so that as more wells are drilled, those dollars just go up between the end of session and now. If you looked at the money that those counties were expected to get in oil impact funding versus now, the dollars have already gone up. They're only going to continue to go up. So do we have challenges to address? Yes. Is it going to take another $2.5 billion? Maybe it does. But as long as this economic prosperity continues, as long as this development continues, and it reaches all parts of the state, don't be wrong, it hits Fargo and Grand Forks, and they are growing and benefiting from it just as well as the western part of the state. I call that a good problem to have.
Mr. Hovan.
I hope Western North Dakota was listening to Jason. What I heard him say is, you've gotten yours. You know, we're hearing two different things from the Republicans. They're saying, we've done so much already, but we promise we're going to do more. The impacts of the oil in Western North Dakota should come as a surprise to no one. And why we didn't deal with this 2 years ago is, again, reacting and leading from behind, and what we've seen in the last 4 to 6 years from this party.
Well, we
Bob,
could leave
can I jump in here for a second, Bob? Because I do want to, Mr. Valu, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm misinterpreting what you said. But what I heard him hint towards, Bob, because he said, hey, 2 years, now we're behind the 8 ball again. Would you be a proponent, when you see how fast we're growing as a state, would you be a proponent coming up this session to talk about, hey, maybe we need to have an annual session, go to more of a South Dakota model and do it that way? Mr. Harms, Mr. Harms.
No.
Why not?
I think we have a system that works pretty good, actually. What we were just talking about, the infrastructure needs in western North Dakota, I'm out there every week. And we have impacts. We in North Dakota are developing, get this, we are developing the largest unconventional resource in the world. Now, I don't want to minimize the impacts, and I take issue with those who try to do so. We have impacts, roads, crime, all of the other things that come with that. But we're also trying to address them, and we're trying to respond to them, get ahead of them where we can. And Jason's point, I said that there was about $600–700 million that went back to local government. That's the right number. It was $590 million just to local government. That's part of that $2.4 billion that the legislature sent out there in all forms, whether it's grants for law enforcement, fire departments, hospital care, roads, you name it. And we'll do the same thing in the next session. The basic idea is, what's the policy that we're trying to talk about up here? And back to sort of the premise of this discussion. Where's politics headed in North Dakota? I think the party and the politicians that are statesmen, open-minded, hear what the people have to say, respond to what the needs are, and have less rhetoric, less yelling at one another, and more thinking will be the ones that better serve the North Dakota people in the long run, and will be rewarded for that.
That's my question. Doesn't it create your opportunity to be more nimble if you're meeting annually for 40, 45 days rather than biannually for 80?
Chris, I came from Minnesota, spent a long time in politics in Minnesota. All it is another 5 months to beat up on each other and be on TV and get talking points out. Honestly, God.
Well, I had this discussion as well, and I said I look at Minnesota. Now, granted, you've got all one party running it, but same thing here in North Dakota. They ended their session early, got their budget done. We didn't start our budget till very late in the session. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but just a thought, Mr. Baloo, would you be a proponent of annual legislation?
I think it should be something we should really consider. Let's face it, between the federal money and the state money, we're talking a multi-billion-dollar business that we're trying to manage. And what do we find in the last session? All the major decisions were made in the 11th hour of the 80th day. That's not the way to run a government for the citizens. It's just not the way.
Mr. Harms, would you be a proponent of eliminating any of the taxes, property taxes, income taxes, corporate taxes this session?
Property taxes, no. Personal income tax, yes. Corporate income tax, yes. Maybe even reduce the sales tax.
Chairman Baloo, any comment on that?
Yeah, I think it would be difficult to reduce the property taxes completely. I think there's a lot that can be done there. I would agree that there's an opportunity for us to look at income tax relief. There's also an opportunity to address the student income issue with regards to the high debt that they carry. While the Bank of North Dakota is profiting to the tune of several $1 million off of their school loans, there's probably some relief that could go to our students to encourage them to stay in the state. I think that there's also an opportunity for us really looking at the corporate tax as it pertains to LLCs in particular. I think there's a real opportunity to bring some relief there to our small businesses in the state. And I would add, you would get that kind of a rational discussion if there was more of a balance in the legislature. And what I mean by that, and I don't mean that in a harmful way, the Republicans will still control the legislature in 2014, no matter how many Democrats are elected.
And Mr. Oben, Mr. Floyd, anytime you guys want to jump in, please do so. There's a great one here. What's your plan? And Chairman Harms, we'll start with you. What's your plan to get the workforce to work in the state or to find housing, and just one under, housing, and also we also saw for the first time, I believe ever, North Dakota ended up on the National Federal Crime Report. So what do you do also to reduce crime out west? So we got 26,000, I think, openings in this state. It's been that way for quite some time. What do you do to recruit more people to the state for the workforce? What do you do about housing, and what do you do about the crime situation?
You want me to start?
Please.
Okay. Thank you. That's a tough one. I guess I'm sort of a free market person, and I think eventually the market will take care of housing and employment and those kinds of things. But to be proactive, I think some of the things that the governor has started, training programs within the university system. There's the outreach program that's underway right now that's a partnership with the private sector that was driven largely by the private sector wanting the government to do more to attract additional employees for the workforce. Those would be a couple of steps. With regard to crime, I think the Attorney General and BCI have already asked for additional agents, have put additional agents out there. I know my hometown of Tioga is putting more police officers on the ground. We just hired, I think, 15 new troopers and put them all out in western North Dakota. I think all of those things are necessary parts of getting our hands around crime. And Bob Baloo mentioned that we've got organized crime in western North Dakota. We do, and people ought to be aware of that. And we need to do everything we can, both at the state level and locally, to address that. It's part of the new reality that we have in North Dakota, and it's just that's a fact that isn't going to go away anytime soon.
And I think it should come as no surprise. I mean, you have more people, you have more money, but our level of police officers, our level of state's attorneys, our levels of jail space have not kept up. Bob's right. Wayne Stenjum has come forward with a proposal. The oil boom's been going on for quite some time. We should have been on the front end. It's more reactionary responses to what's going on in western North Dakota.
Speaking of that, there was a question as well. I'm not sure if it's still up here, but someone asked, okay, if things are so bad in western North Dakota, why are there so few Democrat candidates that are running?
A very good point. Good question. In part, there are many people who are reluctant to run because of the heavy-handedness that they've seen in the last two sessions. I'll be
What do you
very
mean
candid with you.
specifically? What do you mean
Very
specifically?
heavy-handedness. Very heavy-handedness.
Such as what? I mean, that's a pretty
Well,
heavy statement. So what do you mean
Sure,
specifically?
okay, let me give you an example. Representative Al Carlson said to the voters of and this happened to be in Fargo, okay? If you vote for a Democrat, your voice is not going to be heard in the legislature. So don't vote Democrat. I'll be very candid with you. I've been in politics for 40 years in North Dakota. Not only is that somewhat of an extreme, I think it's unfair. Because even if you're in the minority, the voice should be heard.
Can I interrupt you, sir?
And they took it one step farther. He took it one step farther. Okay? At the end of the session, the Republicans decided that for the first time, we will not allow any Democratic legislators to serve as chairman of interim committees. They want absolute control, and that's what you have. And so a lot of people are very reluctant, to come forward and serve the way they should.
In one other example, there was Dickinson Press did a report on an Association of Oil Producing Counties meeting when they're discussing a special session, and they openly discussed, should we come out in favor of this thing or not, because we know there'll be repercussions politically from the majority parties. So, there is that kind of stuff that goes on. There was laughter in this room, but that happens.
I understand that, but go ahead, Chairman Harms. Are you going to say something?
No.
Oh, I understand that, but I think a lot of people would say, okay, we handled Western North Dakota in the special session. There are obviously other issues in the state as well. You've got the diversion and things happen in the east. So I think someone would say, okay, now let's get focused on those areas. And I think the people in the west weighed that. But Chairman Blue, you didn't really answer my question. So the question is, if things are so bad in the west, then why aren't there more candidates?
Well, I think you're going to see there will be more. 2014, granted, but we're taking it a step at a time. I think we're going to see more candidates coming from the east, and then I think we're going to see more candidates in 2016, and then in 2020, I think there will be a whole new look at how the state is addressed politically.
Look, there's not candidates out west because the candidates that we have out west, the elected Republican leadership from the west, has done a good job for the constituents. They've done a good job for the state. Why would you run against that kind of a track record of success? Because that's what it is. Challenges, things we have to deal with, it will always come with growth and opportunity. And yet, those leaders that are out there have done a good job at it, and their people have returned to office before, they're going to do it again. That's why there aren't Democratic candidates trying to run against them.
And I heard on the radio this morning somebody from Williston talking about this session, again, being the make or break session for Western North Dakota. So if everything's taken care of, like it's being said over here, why
Not
are
saying
leaders
that.
from Williston going on radio and saying, this is it? This is the session where they actually listen to us?
But do you understand what I'm asking, Chad? It's the fact that if things have been so bad for so long, because you guys continue to say the Republicans aren't ahead of this curve, they're always behind it, correct? So if they're always behind it, it's so bad, why aren't more people running?
It's very hard political terrain in Western North Dakota for Democrats. I mean, that's the reality a lot of the time. And a lot of the time, national politics bleed into local politics, so it makes it much more difficult for Democrats running in Western North Dakota.
So Chairman Valou and Chad, let's talk your strategy. A question that came up here, and I think this is where you do pose some challenges. You look around, all these Gallup polls or AP polls and whatnot. North Dakota, happiest state in the union, even over Hawaii. I mean, that's amazing. You've got incomes going up, so many things, lowest unemployment. What's your strategy to win some of these seats?
Well, we have a strategy, and I think it's going to unfold in the next 75 days in a way that people will be somewhat surprised. But let me share you one thing about that. And from a public policy standpoint, when we measure our success as a state strictly by the size of our bank account, I think we're missing something. Success is about quality of place, quality of life, quality of security, quality of education. And what we're seeing is that those issues are taking a back seat. And so if people measure our success as a state strictly by the size of either our personal or public bank accounts, yeah, things are really great. But there are issues that need to be addressed, and they're not being because the Republican leaders are more interested in reacting rather than being proactive with new ideas and a new vision and addressing issues on the front end before they occur. And the model is there. The model is there. In the mid-1970s and early 1980s, when we had coal development, private industry state government and local governments worked together to deal with the socioeconomic impacts that were associated in those counties in Cole County. And you look at Beulah and Hazen today, and they are thriving communities because they were pre-planned, they were addressed cooperatively between industry and state government, federal government, and local government. And that model is not being done now.
They're thriving communities for now until Obama's EPA gets a hold of them, and then everybody's going to be moving somewhere else, because that's basically what we're going to get to shut down the entire coal industry.
Well, and thank God we have Senator Heidi Heitkamp standing up to the Obama administration on those EPA regulations.
Because she's doing so much in the U.S. Senate to address so many issues that are being taken forward. I mean, how many bills has the U.S. Senate passed that have taken a roll call vote in
And Congress is
6
just
years?
rolling, aren't they?
Oh, Jay,
They're
you
just
don't
doing a
want to
great
go
job.
there. We want to talk
We
about
can-
Congressman Kramer?
We can pull out the list of bills that the Republican Congress has passed, sent to the Senate, bipartisan, common sense bills to do things like, oh my God, build the Keystone Pipeline. Get
Which
some trucks
Senator
off the road,
Heitkamp
move
supports.
some oil. Which she supports, but she isn't doing anything about it in the Senate because Harry Reid and Obama won't let her. The Democrat challenger in Montana, who just had to stop running because he didn't know how to write his own term paper, he doesn't have a roll call vote on his record.
Luckily,
Serving
we're
as
in
a
North
US
Dakota,
Senator,
not
he doesn't have a
Montana.
roll call
Gentlemen,
vote.
I don't want to get into a national conversation or get off the rails, so let's go here. Chairman Harms, two things here. The happiest state results were not based on bank accounts, Chairman Liu, but quality of life. I saw that as well. And Chairman Harms, let's not forget the GOP let their far right dominate the social issues last session. Are they proud of it?
Well, let's go back to the happiest state, and I think that's exactly right. It's based upon quality of life, our economic success, and I was pleased. I told the Republican Party convention that in April. I was pleased that our state is viewed as one of the happiest in the country, and I think that's a result of all of the work that we've done over the last 20 years, which allows us to come to where we are today, allows us, our grandchildren and our children, to have good paying jobs and stay in North Dakota. That helps quality of life and helps us remain happy. With regard to the far right, the social issues, I think that this is a discussion that's been unfolding in North Dakota and across our country for the last several decades, and I think it's healthy, and what I'm looking forward to is to allowing the people of North Dakota to express their views in November with regard to Measure 1 and that life issue. I think all of us in this room view life as important. Now, how we measure that, how we apply it in our families and in our own personal lives is something we can debate about, but I think giving the people of North Dakota an opportunity to express their views about the sanctity of life, I think is a good thing.
Chairman Harms, I'm going to start with you on a couple of things here, and this is going to go in a few different directions, but we had the recent report come out about the human services not good. One of the leaders in that arena talked about, look, the problem that we have is, yeah, there's plenty of money here. They gave us a lot more money, but we don't have any way to sort of measure our successes. I look at higher ed. You heard the same thing here where Grant Shaff says, I don't know if I really trust the information I'm getting. There's no real true metrics to measure that. Then you look at North Dakota Game and Fish, still guns missing. First time they've ever been audited since they've been an agency. Had Corey Mock on my show. He said, Chris, I think it's like 38 out of 62 agencies that have been audited. Would you be a proponent of more audits or some way to allow people to get a better idea of performance of these agencies so we know that the money is actually being utilized effectively?
That's a question to me?
Yes, sir.
No.
Why not?
I think we make the mistake of reacting to a particular issue, whether it's guns missing at Game and Fish or some event that we think that we need a new law or a new regulation or something like that in place to create more of a perfect society. And I think that's wrong-headed. If we think about what our country has done over the last 200 years, free-thinking people, free market principles, those kinds of things will produce the better results over the long term. But as we try to construct these mechanisms to address these problems every time that a problem arises, I think is the wrong direction.
But Chairman Harms, I'm not asking for new laws. I'm asking for an audit to assess the performance. And so how are we going to go, yeah, we're doing a great job, but we can't assess the performance?
And so this would be the administrative part of me and how I would implement that. I wouldn't require any additional audits. What I would do is I would allow the political process to work. If there's an agency head that isn't doing his job, isn't managing his people the way he should be, then that person should be fired.
So should Terry Steinwan be gone?
Well, I think that's an issue. Terry Steinwan is a friend of mine, and I know he's a very good administrator. Now, whether that's the right application for discipline, but I think the point is that you allow people to manage their agencies, don't constrain them with all kinds of new rules and process, and when they manage correctly, reward them. When they don't manage correctly, discipline them in an appropriate manner.
So has Terry Steinwan did a good job as the director?
Absolutely.
Based on what?
10 years, I think Terry has been the director at Game and Fish, about 10 years, give or take. He's done a good job administering our natural resources. The fishing that Bob Ballou and I both like to do, hunting is at an all-time, well, maybe not right now, but hunting licenses are up. I think we've done a good job in terms of managing the natural resources, and Terry Steinwan is at the head of that.
Chairman Blue, any thoughts on audits or performance?
Yeah, I think it would be important for us at this stage of acceleration in everything that's going on at the state level that maybe we do need some performance audits of every state agency before we start issuing new rules and regulations. Not only in terms of the health department, but the Department of Mineral Resources. And you know what, I sort of find it interesting what Bob said. Oh yes, by the way, Bob and I share the same space on Lake Sakakawea for fishing, so I want you all to know that.
And Jason and I don't have time to go
Right.
fishing.
They're still young.
I was going to say that comes with hair, but no, I can't say that either. An interesting point that Bob made about, you know, the free enterprise system and how important that is. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. But stop and think about what just happened the last couple of weeks. When the heat really got heavy on flaring, what did the Republican leadership of the state do through the Industrial Commission? They immediately went to a clampdown type policy, potentially, with regards to drilling, a reaction. 9 years of flaring, no proactive measures put in place. But when the heat got to them publicly, they reacted. And I think their reaction is misplaced. And here's what I mean by that. Dealing with the flaring issue is not about the driller or the oil company that's drilling the hole. It's about a proactive strategy for the state to become a full-fledged partner with the midstream pipeline companies and the processors of natural gas like ONEOK to create a strategy that can effectively make the state a partner with them. And why should the state be a partner with them? Because we are an economic island when it comes to getting either the raw materials or processed materials to the most effective marketplaces in this nation. And so a total misplacement, a reaction, and that's why we need some political balance so that we are not constantly reacting and creating more problems than we already have.
Chairman Harms.
Chris, I'd like to just speak to that a little bit. I've worked in flaring for many years. A couple things. In the 2011 legislature, the legislature took up the issue of flaring, and they put some incentives in place in 2011. They looked at that again in 2013, expanded those incentives to address flaring or help address flaring in that regard. Now, the Industrial Commission, I think, has done an exceptional job, and it's difficult, and I'm sympathetic to the oil industry, because if all of us here are stockholders of the Harms Oil Company, I should be so lucky, but let's say we're all shareholders, and we wouldn't want to plan pipelines that were 10 times bigger than what we thought we needed. So we put a pipeline in. Well, this resource is a lot larger than many companies plan for, so the pipelines are undersized. But here's the other thing about the Industrial Commission, and I applaud the governor in particular for taking this issue head on a year ago. And he met with the industry, and he told the industry, look, we're going to have to address this issue, and he was very strong in his statements to them. Since then, the Industrial Commission has applied and has promulgated a new order, new rules as of July 1st that takes the thresholds and lowers our flaring from 27 down to 23, down to 20, down to 10%. In 18 months, we should be at, by January 2016, we should be flaring 15% if the industry meets its goals. So I think, I appreciate what Bob is saying, that, and I believe a lot. I look out my front door in Williston and I see flaring in McKenzie County. I don't like it. So, but I like the fact that we are getting on that issue and it's being addressed. Now, should we have seen that 3 years earlier? I don't know, but the fact is, it's part of what we're addressing, and I think we're doing a good job to do so.
I want to give each one of you a chance to comment on this. Interesting question, because I hear out in the streets, you know, Jack Seaman, Libertarian candidate, getting some traction. It says this: can we do away with the two-party system? I think essentially it said, hey, it's too frustrating, too much stubbornness. Can we do away with it, one, and why is a two-party system valuable? Chairman Harms, we'll start with you and just go down the row.
Well, I think the two-party system is constructive. One of the things that I've said since I was elected chairman a year ago, is I'm interested in lowering the rhetoric and the yelling at one another and increasing the thinking and the policy discussions that are underway here today. Now, if the Republicans and Democrats don't deliver for the people of North Dakota, we'll see movements and factions come up either within those parties or a completely separate movement. But I think the two-party system serves well in North Dakota, and I guess I don't see it being undone.
You know, the difficulty I have in maybe stepping back from a partisan perspective for a minute and looking at it holistically in politics, the problem that we have is that this kind of debate, this kind of, at times, intelligent conversation is what we need to do in order to make this democracy work. And it's not it can't be a headline news, it can't be a 30-second TV spot, it can't be go for the guy that can speak in complete sentences after the guy who doesn't do such a good job pronouncing words, right? It's that real substance that we need to take a look at. We need to have these conversations. We need our kids to have these conversations. We need everybody to be involved and tied into this system, and then it can work. We're all gonna walk away from here today with a better idea of what these parties stand for, of who's going what direction, of what we agree with and what we don't. But a big majority of the electorate doesn't do that. And there were some posts about the apathy and the low turnout numbers both in Minnesota, here in North Dakota. That's a symptom not just of this process, it's a symptom of the fact that, well, people don't get as engaged voting when things are going well. That's a scientific fact. But we need to take a step back and look at how we approach this, how we reach out to younger voters, to the business community, to seniors, to any interest group, and make sure that we're engaging on topics and on issues and having these discussions, rather than just, well, here's my $5,000 check to run some more TV ads that, you know, give an out-of-focus picture of my opponent. That doesn't help anyone. And from both party sides, we need to get away from that kind of work and get into policy discussions of what's going to work and move North Dakota forward. And if North Dakota voters are making their choices based on that, we're all going to be in a better position no matter which way that die is cast.
Chairman Blue, two-party system?
Oh yes, I think a two-party system is extremely important to our democracy. Look, we are a young democracy. We're still in an experimental stage as to whether or not this democracy can succeed. And I believe it can succeed, but I believe that the way it does succeed is if we have strong two-party system. And the only way you have a strong two-party system is by making sure that every citizen exercises their constitutional responsibility to participate in the process. I think we're caught up too often by, if you're a liberal or a progressive, you listen all day long to MSNBC. If you're a conservative, you listen all day long to Fox News. And we need to start thinking for ourselves. We need to take the knowledge base as individual voters and sort through it to come up with our decision on what we think is right or best, not totally relying on the absoluteness of what someone else has said on a particular talk show.
Chad, do you mind if we got 5 minutes, I want to give each person a minute
I'll go
for kind
really
of a final
fast,
word.
I promise.
Go
All
for
right.
it.
I agree, we need a two-party system. I also agree with Jason that we need to have real discussions about the issues going up until the election in 2014. So that's why, Jason and Bob, I hope you'll talk to your statewide candidates and get them to agree to debate our candidates. Ryan Taylor's been asking for a monthly debate. I think Doug has agreed to one. Let's do monthly debates with our statewide candidates where we can talk about real issues. So, Jason, if we really want to have discussions and not just have crappy mail pieces, let's have debates.
Final word, Chairman Ballew, we're going to start with you.
Well, thank you all very much for sitting through this. Sometimes democracy can be a little bit painful, but as one question was raised here, the two-party system is important. And sometimes it does get a little mean and, dug down on the carpet and that kind of thing. But that's what the system is about. And the key to this is that in North Dakota, we have a tremendous future. I mean, we're the envy of every single state in the nation. The question we have to ask ourselves in 75 days, can it be better with some balance in the political process as it relates to public policy questions?
Jason.
Well, thank you all for having us here again today, too. I came from a chamber background myself right out of college, so I appreciate the work you do and the chance to have these kind of panels in front of you. You can say every year is a critical election year. This one in North Dakota is no different. It's a big picture kind of a question. Do you want to continue the success that we've had for the last 20 years? Do you want to re-elect the leaders that have helped us get to this point, put the policies in place that have led to the growth and opportunity that you see today? Or do you want to go back to policies that didn't work? We've heard a lot about should've and could've and would've from the Democrats today, and yet they had control of the legislature. They had control of state party politics for a long time. And where were their policies getting us? People were leaving Western North Dakota. Nobody's kids wanted to come back. They went to school in NDSU. They kept on going east. You want to go back to that? And if so, cast your ballot accordingly. If you want to continue to move the state forward, if you want to fix what we need to work on, you want to address the challenges that come with growth and opportunity, and you want experienced leadership to do that, then vote for Republicans this fall.
Chairman Harms.
Well, again, Chris and the North Dakota Chamber, thank you. This process that we're involved in truly is the framework, the underpinning of our democracy, and I'm disappointed that we show 13% of our voters turning out in a primary, or 17, 18% statewide. That's a terrible signal for our country, and we all need to do better in terms of helping our kids understand, our friends and our colleagues understand that the political process isn't something they should turn their noses up. It offends me when somebody says, oh, I don't do politics. That is not the right answer that Americans should be taking with regard to this process. It's vitally important. Now, as far as North Dakota is concerned, the Republican Party, I said it at the beginning. I think that North Dakota is on the right track. We've got money in the bank. We've got an economy that's on fire. The North Dakota Republican Party has provided $1.3 billion worth of tax relief in the last legislative session, almost $3 billion of tax relief since 2009. We're funding the right priorities, our infrastructure, K-12, higher ed, human services. We're doing the right things. Do we have challenges? Absolutely, and we shouldn't discount them or dismiss them. We should address them head on as best we can. So with that, I thank you all for your attention. Again, Chris, the Chamber, thank you for letting us be here.
Chad, I apologize. I thought that was your last word, so we'll give you the
That's
last
fine.
word.
I'll go
my
really
friend.
fast. Chris, thank you very much. I think you've done a great job
Thank
moderating
you. I
this
appreciate
debate.
that.
And thank you to Andy and John and the Chamber for holding this event. You know, often some of my liberal friends don't think very highly of the Chamber, but we've been able to develop a very good working relationship with John and Andy. I actually worked out of their office for about 6 months when we were fighting against Measure 2 in June of 2012. So where is it? Well, I don't wear that in public. But I think it goes to show that in a state like North Dakota, we can work together, we can have both sides be part of the conversation, and we can sit up here and be somewhat civil. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you for doing this. I loved it. Thank you very much. Give him a big round of applause.